Major breaking news by CNN. As I predicted, it turns out, according to the reporting by CNN, Kash Patel, the head of the FBI, is in the process of moving people from the ATF to the FBI to do other things besides harass American gun owners. CNN doesn't appear to be happy, but I am. Let's continue to break the story about how the ATF is going to keep dwindling and dwindling. The next domino has just fallen. Let's talk about it. Hey folks, I'm Mark Smith, host of the Four Boxes Diner, proud American gun owner, constitutional attorney, member of the United States Supreme Court Bar, and I'm proud to say the top voice of the Second Amendment in America, thanks to the 2025 Gundies Awards. Thank you so much for your support out there. I really appreciate it. Okay, folks, so here's the story. Big story. CNN is reporting late on Saturday night that FBI Director Kash Patel, who is also the acting director of the ATF, has outlined plans to move as many as 1,000 ATF agents, these are the law enforcement agents that carry the guns and arrest powers, to move as many as 1,000 agents from the ATF to the FBI, which would eliminate approximately one-third, according to CNN's reporting, one-third of the personnel, or I should say of the agents currently at the ATF. This would be a dramatic reduction, a dramatic cutback of the number of the people, the number of employees, the number of agents that work at the ATF. And the answer is this should have occurred yesteryear. Now, this is entirely consistent with the trend being our friend involving the diminishment of the ATF. Now, just to remind you of the problem, and then we're going to go through all the different ways the ATF is getting diminished in light of this recent reporting by CNN, no less. The fundamental problem is that the ATF really should be a regulatory agency at most. And what I mean by that is, if you need an agency that has to do kind of regulatory civil matters like the Department of Motor Vehicles, meaning you need an agency to deal with tax stamps associated with NFA items, if you need to have some agency overseeing the processing of applications to become a federal firearm licensee, get an FFL license, right? And to sort of monitor that with inspectors and just basically do very basic regulatory processes, no different than like in health inspectors in a restaurant, to go into a restaurant and look around and make sure, the restaurant is like doing everything proper in terms of the water temperatures and the freezer temperatures and whatnot. Then conceivably, you could have a purely regulatory type agency, and it could be the ATF. You could do that. But the problem historically is that the ATF has a dual function. It has regulatory powers, which is to oversee the gun industry, and it also has criminal justice powers, law enforcement powers, where you have thousands of ATF agents with the power to arrest people, the power to carry a badge, the power to carry a gun, and they essentially function as federal law enforcement agents. No different than FBI agents. So the question becomes, why do you need FBI agents and ATF agents? How are they really different? And the answer is they're really not. And if anything, having ATF law enforcement agents and FBI agents is actually very dangerous in my opinion. The reason why I say this is this. When you have competing law enforcement agencies, one is clearly the premier agency, that's the FBI, and then you have like the little stepbrother, right? The ATF agents out there. The problem is the little stepbrother ATF agents are looking for opportunities to either one-up their big brother, the FBI, or to show they're equally good as the FBI agents. And as a consequence, I've seen this actually on Wall Street in a lot of contexts dealing with investment banks and everything else. The point is, when you have sort of an inferior group of people competing with a more superior, better reputation group of people, right? Whether it's correct or not, if that's the perception in the public mind that the FBI is the elite agents and the other agents like the ATF are not elite, they're inferior relative to the FBI. If you have that public perception, whether it's true or not, doesn't matter. If that's the public perception, the problem is you cause people at places like the ATF to try to go above and beyond the call of duty, in a sense, to try to show they're just as good as the FBI, if not better. And as a result of that, in my opinion, is why you get these terrible debacles like the Waco tragedy in Texas. You get the problems with Ruby Ridge, right? And you get all these other headaches because the ATF is trying to do operations that, in my view, they really should not be doing, but they do it because they're trying to justify their very existence to show that we're just as good as the FBI. So you get, gun walking in Mexico, Fast and Furious involving the Mexican, Texas, and Arizona borders and all this kind of stuff. You get all these operations that get totally screwed up by the by the ATF, because the ATF agents are trying to compete with the FBI. And one of the ways to solve all of this, of course, is to eliminate those ATF agents entirely, or at least get them out of the ATF and start giving them other assignments, which is what this CNN report is suggesting, that these agents are indeed going to be reassigned away from the ATF and laser focused on immigration enforcement, which is correct. So this is all good news. This is consistent with the reporting I did yesterday, and now CNN, after my video of yesterday about how it looks like the ATF is becoming diminished in stature. The scope of its authority is shrinking. Its budget appears to be shrinking. The trend is our friend when it comes to getting rid of the ATF. These are all good facts on the ground as I see it. And the fact that CNN is kind of corroborating kind of my message late on Saturday night is a very good thing. And just as a quick reminder, some of the other evidence on the ground that why it looks like the ATF is going to be going away. I'm not saying going away entirely, but will be substantially diminished, especially their law enforcement side, which they should be, because they should be just regulatory agencies like the DMV or the health inspectors, like the FDA or the EPA. They should not have special law enforcement powers. If they see a crime, they see evidence of a crime, they should pick up the phone and call the FBI. They should not try to go out there and deal with it themselves. That's the reality on the ground. Now, again, the fact that the continuing resolution budget recently just gave a lump sum of money to the Department of Justice in its entirety without earmarking specific money for the ATF is a very good sign. The fact that Attorney General Pam Bondi just issued a kind of an initial regulation saying that they're going to pull the authority away from the ATF for doing the restoration of rights of people that have lost their Second Amendment rights and can get them back. They're going to pull that authority to make those decisions away from the ATF and give it to the Department of Justice generally, which could include anyone from Dan Bongino to Kash Patel to Pam Bondi getting involved with that and pulling it away from the ATF. Furthermore, Pam Bondi on Fox News, Attorney General Pam Bondi on Fox News and other places has made repeatedly this statement that's entirely consistent with what we've taught you on this channel, which is that the only time you can take away someone's right to keep and bear arms, the only time you can deprive them of their fundamental right to keep and bear arms, is if you can establish they are a violent danger to themselves or to others, which is entirely consistent with the decision in Rahimi in 2024 by the U.S. Supreme Court, which is why I kept telling everyone that the Rahimi case is not bad for us. Mr. Rahimi lost the case, yes, but the way he lost the case was good for us in the Second Amendment community, because the way he lost the case was a decision by Chief Justice John Robertson, the majority of the court, that said that you have to be found to be a violent danger. You have to have been found to be a violent danger by a court. And even if a court finds that you're a violent danger to someone else, the only remedy that arises therefrom is you can be temporarily, hear what I just said, temporarily disarmed. That's the holding of Rahimi, the Supreme Court. And to see that Attorney General Pam Bondi on TV and in the media, as well as Kash Patel, is making these kinds of points, that they're going to focus the efforts of the Department of Justice on those people that are either in the country illegally, kick them out, they're illegal aliens and the like, and or if they're a violent danger. Now, this is hugely positive, as I explained before, because if the Department of Justice is laser focused on violently dangerous thugs, gangs, cartels, nut jobs, violent psychopaths, that is very good for the Second Amendment community for at least two reasons. The first reason is that if they're focusing on violent nut job, psychopath, cartel, gang members, and terrorists and the like, it means they are not bothering non-violent, ordinary, law-abiding gun owners who maybe have some ridiculous item in their closet that has a barrel that's too short or some other nonsensical item, because as you know, almost all federal gun control law is what is known as a malum prohibitum crime, which means it's a crime simply because the legislature says so. There's no moral component to it. A malum prohibitum crime, like the barrel is too short on a gun, is a classic example of this, in contrast to another type of crime known as malum in se. Malum in se is simply Latin for immoral or evil in and of itself. Those are things that we all understand to be wrong as humans. Committing murder, committing rape, committing a robbery, committing a burglary, committing an assault. These are things that are just inherently evil. You just kind of know it in your bones as a human that you're doing something wrong if you engage in these activities. And that's why to see Pam Bondi and Kash Patel specifically say that the Department of Justice moving forward is going to laser focus on violent criminals, violent crimes consistent with the Rahimi holding, and not malum prohibitum crimes, is a great news for American gun owners, because it was Joe Biden that was trying to go after all gun owners. In fact, Joe Biden's Department of Justice, as best I could tell, wanted to go after non-violent gun owners with malum prohibitum crime charges instead of even going after the violent thugs. Now, the other reason why this approach from the Department of Justice is good for the Second Amendment community is this. Remember, when is the most dangerous time to be in the Second Amendment community? When is the greatest risk to we losing our Second Amendment rights? Under what circumstances? You know what I'm going to say. The answer is when some psychopathic nut job goes out there and shoots up a building, shoots up a school, kills a bunch of people with a gun. That gives rise to all these crazy calls for gun control. So to the extent that the Attorney General of the United States is out there identifying psychopathic, violent nut jobs, cartels, gang members, and the like, and grabbing them and either kicking them out of the country and or locking them up so they cannot commit those horrendous crimes, that is a second reason why it's good for the Second Amendment community, because the last thing we want are more nut jobs committing high-profile mass shootings or mass murders, because, again, it contributes to this argument that guns are somehow a problem, which, of course, we understand that's not true, but you have to, of course, play in the world of public perception, and mass murders and mass shootings is, of course, never a good look for the gun community, even though it's not the gun community doing it, it's a psychopathic nut job, and really the only way to stop that from occurring is to be able to have guys with guns to shoot back and to stop the bad guy. But you understand the way the media works in America today. So putting them in prison ahead of time before the shooting, of course, is superior to having them go out and commit murder for many reasons, one of which is you stop the murder, and number two, of course, you stop calls for gun control, which is the best opportunity for the anti-gun movement to do so. Beyond that, of course, we know the other evidence, the ATF is in the process of going away, is that Donald Trump fired and Pam Bondi fired the pardon attorney at the Department of Justice that refused to give back the gun rights of Mel Gibson, according to reports. We also know the fact that the Department of Justice fired the counsel to the ATF who was who worked under the Biden administration, presumably in favor of gun control law, and replaced that person with Second Amendment scholar out of George Mason University, Professor Rob Leiter. Again, another powerful piece of evidence in favor of the Second Amendment and against the growth of the ATF as the American gun regulator, which it should not be. So anyway, this is all great news, but this breaking news out of CNN about Kash Patel potentially cutting as many as 1,000 ATF agents from the 5,000 employee agency is a great start and further proof that the trend is our friend. And it looks like the Trump administration is trying to diminish the scope and the size and the powers of the ATF, and I say good riddance, and I hope we can get to where we need to be. At the end of the day, I think it's okay if you have a very small ATF that simply processes FFL applications and does some NFA items to the extent the NFA is still around, which it will be, because we're not going to be able to knock that out with a filibuster out there. So the reality is we're going to need some sort of agency, and having a very small diminished agency like the ATF with a few hundred employees is probably okay. Compared to what we have now, which is a 5,000 employee agency, which is no good. Okay, folks, so there you have it. Hope you learned something here today at the 4 Boxes Diner. Make sure you subscribe. Don't forget to follow me on X at 4 Boxes Diner, and subscribe to both here at YouTube and Rumble, and we'll talk to you again real soon here at the 4 Boxes Diner.
Orders up. Table 2A.